I think this is something that I say all the time, but don't sleep on dreamers. Dreamers are fighters, and I mean that. Dreamers are fighters. I live in Los Angeles. I live in a city that is full of dreamers, and LA gets a bad rep sometimes, right? But a lot of the people that come out to LA, they're dreamers, and the thing about dreamers is they will fight tooth and nail to get their dreams realized, and I'll say that about a lot of other people. And again, this film goes into legacy. Fabian is building his legacy. He's trying to leave a couple good stories that are impactful behind. And I think a lot of that is to do with just that dreamer mentality. So when I think of Fabian, I think about how much I love him. It's because there's a lot of me in him.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Living the Next Chapter. It's a joy to have people on the show that write, people on the show that act, and today I have somebody who does like everything, which is great. Matt's on the show today. We're going to talk about all the great things he's up to. He's got some great projects to talk to us about, some amazing co-stars that he's had the opportunity to work with and brush shoulders with. I am a big fan, so I'm so excited that Matt has time for us, and the fact that he's going to jump in and share his wisdom with you as a writer as well to encourage you in your journey. Matt's got all the insights to help you. Matt, welcome to Living the Next Chapter. So glad to have you here.
David, thank you so much for having me on your show today. I can already tell this is going to be an awesome conversation.
I love it. Okay, so I know that based on all my research and looking back into your history, you have been in different parts of the U.S. I always like to ask this off the bat. Where are you currently? Where are you in this big world of ours today?
Absolutely. So I'm in Los Angeles now. My mom and dad originally are from New York City and then moved down to Virginia. So I grew up in Virginia, humble beginnings, really found my way to the local theaters really early on. And I get asked this all the time, but, the acting bug just really hit me from the time that I arrived on this planet. I just felt like for me, escaping to my own mind, my own heart, soul, and creating, stories and letting that drive me to create an impact on the world. It always felt like the thing that I was meant to do. And so I actually moved back to New York City after, basically, getting a couple regional theater gigs in Virginia growing up. And studied there, found my people. It's really kind of where it took off for me. I lived with my grandmother. She really kept me safe in the big city, gave me a home to come to every night, which was really important for me because I was one of those people that was like really hyper focused on the goal and really trying to do it the right way and trying to build my business as an actor, because that's part of it, right? And I think a lot of my focus came into play just realizing how I could have control, and I know that we're going to talk about that a lot more today, but got my equity card. That's the Broadway union in the United States for people that don't know. And, getting a national tour really just taught me that kind of grind of it all, which I love because, again, it was a children's show. I got to perform for children. Sometimes the shows were at 9 a.m. And there's just no better audience than children. If you give them energy, they will give it right back. Very special, taught me a lot. And just studied. Met some really great acting teachers there. Terry Schreiber became like a grandfather to me. He was Edward Norton's coach. He's got his studio in Chelsea. And I also went to Marymount Manhattan College and studied with some great people there. Kevin Connell, a true lover of actors. I really always gravitated to the acting coaches that really could love it out of you and didn't feel like they needed to break you down, but this just had that innate ability to just make you trust the process. And Terry was incredible in that he would throw everything at you, whether it be Meisner or Stanislavski or Strasberg, whatever it was, and then have you find and craft your own process. Because I think as artists, a lot of what we need to work on constantly is diving deep into what our unique process is, so that we can tell stories meaningfully and that we know how to connect to the material. So I actually met my wife at Terry Schreiber Studios in New York City, and we found out that we were actually from the same town in rural Virginia. We were paired together in a breakup scene. We from Say Anything, the John Cusack movie. And I just really remember that day like it was yesterday. I noticed that, we had the same area code. I said, "Where are you from in Virginia?" "I have a 5-4 area code too." She said, "Front Royal." And I said, "Excuse me?" And she said, "Front Royal, Virginia. Have you heard of it?" And I looked at her and I said, "I'm from Front Royal." And she was like, "No way, no way." And I was like, "Yeah, no, my dad's the karate guy across from the Main Street Cinema because I grew up in a dojo, fourth degree black belt. That's always kind of been a big part of my backstory." And I was like, what does your family do?" Because again, this is a small little pocket of the country where like, you would know. And she looked at me and she said, "My family owns the Apple House." And I, on 79th and Broadway, pointed to my dresser and said, "Look at my dresser. There were 3 things with the price tag still on them from the Apple House." So at that moment, I literally looked at her and I said, "Well, we've already gotten the breakup out of the way. Are you ready to go out on the date?" And that's how we met. And that's kind of what fueled the next chapter, which was us moving out to LA. And Terry was also a big part of that. I mean, you talk about someone that really loves and cares about you. I was close to a couple Broadway gigs. It's hard sometimes to be so close, right? And I was final callbacks for Wicked and Spring Awakening and Jersey Boys and Avenue Q, all these great shows. And basically at that point, I got brought into the office because I was feeling a little bit down, and Terry, gave me his time, and he said, "Maybe you should try LA. I've seen you in class. You feel, it feels to me like film could be a really great medium for you. Film and TV could be a really great medium for you." And it was that January that Laura and I packed the bags and moved across the country and just gave it like a 3-month a try, right? And we just never looked back. We really do love LA. It feels like home, and it's a great place to, again, be around your people. And the journey continues out here now.
It's amazing. All right. And I was going through your IMDb and I'm like, oh my gosh, as I'm getting tired my fingers getting tired from scrolling with all of the things you've done in the past. It's amazing. As an actor working with amazing talent and having the opportunity to be on set with some of these people, what kind of things do you pull out of these interactions with people on set that make you a little bit better as an actor, help you to improve? Like, I would believe you continually want to be learning and growing and developing your craft, but just being in the presence of some of these people that you admire, what kind of things do you pick up on just by watching them do their craft?
I have always been a student of the game, and I just love learning from people that have been doing it longer, that not only have been successful, because success sometimes is outward facing, but people that just are on sets constantly and they know how to do it the right way. And I'll speak to 2 that were on, actually 3 that were on our set specifically. Graham McTavish, who I play opposite. I mean, he, again, you don't know these people before you show up on set. And it just it was instant, and it was an instant connection. And ironically, I've got a good story to tell you. He was picked up from the airport, and I felt like I was coming down from a cold because, I just wanted to make sure that I was in tip-top shape. I was there the longest amount of time for the shoot. 6.5 weeks I was there. He was there for 2. And getting picked up from the airport, he wanted to make one stop, and it was at the local Walgreens in Polson, Montana, right? I ended up going to the Walgreens at the exact same time, and that's where we met. And it was just kismet, and it was amazing. Just meeting him for the first time, I just connected with him, and just uniquely connected with him. And through that process, just realized what a pro he was. And again, I think it was just the time and the space that he gave me, which is what a lot of pros do, especially when they are telling a big story with you and by you. He would, we would go to breakfast together. We would go to dinners together. We would talk through these scenes. And I feel like that's where you find a lot of what ends up making it to the screen is off screen. Same with Michelle Hurd. I mean, there was a time where, we had a 2-hour conversation looking at the sunset on the lake, and she was just, telling me about her backstory and her journey. And it really just was a gift. I mean, I looked at it even in that moment as what a gift I am receiving right now from someone that's been doing it as long as she has, that has done it the right way. That is, I mean, I don't have enough great things to say about Michelle Hurd. She's fire. She's passionate. She's a true lover of actors, but she's a pro. She's just so emotionally available like Graham is, and you just don't see that often. And then Michael Monks, again, we have one scene together. I was on set with him for one day, and what a masterclass it was just to be around him and to, again, understand that craft. So I say this, David, in like a lot of ways, but most succinctly, I feel like I've already won with this film because of the relationships that I have. Because now I have these people where if I have a question, I can text them, I can call them, we get on the calls. I might see Michelle next week at my screening. Graham reached out to me the other day and made sure I was okay with the fire that's, a few miles away from me. These are people that are my friends, and Somewhere in Montana is one of those films that is uniquely special because it is an indie where the cast and the crew were interchangeable. I mean, we were so close. Like I said, we would go on to breakfast, dinners together. We'd go on hikes together. We'd go boating together. We just couldn't get enough of each other, and I felt like we all needed this kind of like kumbaya movie to come together. And we'll get into a little bit more, but it happens to be a real story of the times, and I think we told it proudly. And I think that's because of the relationships that we all have that were just so close off screen.
Interesting. So for my audience, we have authors on. And often I'll ask an author that has a very visual component to what they're writing. I'm like, do you ever envision somebody actually putting this on the screen? Do you ever think of your work being, like, do you write in pictures? Like, tell me about how you craft your story and how you craft the world you're creating as an author, as a writer. And do you actually envision someday that this could end up on a show on television or a movie or something? Like, is that how you write? And so often people will say to me, I would just love to see somebody take this and put it out there in a visual form and adapt it for whatever movie or TV they're working on. But that would be a dream for me as a writer. So as somebody who is the one that brings life to words on screen, tell me a little bit about how you connect with the character that you're portraying on screen. What kind of things do you do to get inside of the mind of the writer so that you get a really good sense of who this character is, so that you can do justice to what the creator of the writing is looking for from that character?
Phenomenal question. Every actor, it goes back to process, has a little bit of a different process in how they do it. For me, it's backstory. I love to, journal, even think, even if I'm like meditating, just thinking about what makes this character click, when he's having a lot of the behaviors that he's having, what is making him think that way, feel that way? And those types of like elements to me are very important. Another thing that I've grown into is method, and method acting in many ways has a bad rep for some of the more bastardized things that you hear about it. But there are good parts of method acting too. One thing that I did for this film is I lost 25 pounds, and I hired a nutritionalist, consultant, Jennifer and Nathan DeTracy, who were incredible. They basically taught me how to essentially lose weight in a healthy way, but also to find a way to get to the body type that I felt embodied this character. That way, when I showed up on set, I uniquely felt like I was in that body of the character. I like to lift weights. I like my protein shakes, and I let all of that go. For me, it was kitchen and cardio because I felt like Fabian Verdugo was driven. He'd skip meals. He was that director, again, that was passionate, that would go down with his ship, but that sometimes wouldn't take care of himself because he was taking care of everybody else. So uniquely to me, those are the two elements that I really focus on as part of my process, is, again, diving into the personal elements that maybe connect me to this character. I will say with Fabian, he's the first character that I've ever portrayed that I've truly fallen in love with. I see a lot of myself in him. And I really wanted to honor that in any way that I could by doing the work in every way possible. And so doing those backstory, that foundation, just gave me the ability to, when I finally came to set around so many great actors like Graham and Michelle, is that I was able to just forget all of that. And that's kind of where the magic happens, right? When you're on set and you've done the work, but then you don't really know what's going to happen, but you really feel like you're in the character. You've given them such a rich foundation to draw from. That's when anything's possible, right? And that's really what good acting is and where it comes from. So, yeah, I just feel like for me that is a big part of the journey. I'll also speak to, since you talked about writing, right? It all starts with the words. And this process for me was unique because Brandon Smith is the writer and the director of Somewhere in Montana. So we would get on Zooms just like we are right now, and we would talk scene by scene by scene. And again, writers write what they know. He wrote the two lead characters of Fabian and John as really embodiments of himself in a way, right? Because he is a director in real life, and he lives in Polson, Montana, so he understands the atmosphere and the world of Montana. So going scene by scene with him was just a gift. And it's something that I always reflect so fondly on, because it was my ability to really hone in on the character that he wrote, when he first put it on the page, and what he was needing for the character. But something special about Brandon is he also wanted me to bring myself to it. So it was a true collaboration on what I could bring to the character and what he saw in the character to really build the foundation for what ended up being Fabian Verdugo in this film.
Excellent. And the one thing, you have a musical background, which I love as well. It's another whole tangent. We can go down that path. But as a musician myself, I see that I am kind of the sum of all of the musical inspirations I've ever crossed my paths my whole life. Yeah. And I take elements of certain bands and styles and genres and elements of music that I love, and I throw it into a big blender, and it becomes my version of what I sound like. And I know probably for you as well, you have a lot of inspirations that kind of help lead you and guide you and direct you as you do music. But I think as a character on screen, really you're starting with just the words, and that's the formation of this character that you have to bring to life. But there's this other side of that character that's not written, that is the formation of all of the influences of his character over its whole entire life before he even got to the scene, before he got to this part of his life where the movie's portraying him. All those are elements that you are conscious and unconscious of, that you're pulling from to make this person more relatable. And I love how an actor can make somebody feel so real that there's nothing fake about them or a facade, that there's no depth to them, because you're pulling from all these different inspirations as well. So for you, beyond the words and sitting with Brandon and kind of getting the scope of the project, is there anything else that's like a magic tool that you like to leverage to get even deeper beyond the surface level of your character?
For sure. It really comes to just, again, finding your process. I think my process has come over time because, again, I've studied so many of the different, acting styles, and they're all great. But the methodology is really finding what speaks to you, right? So it's how you can get deeper and deeper and deeper into whatever it takes to feel like you're either showing up on stage or on set, and you are in the full instrument inside and out, where you feel like you have that character, where you are living as that character. And I feel like so much of that, because I can speak to you as a fellow artist, is your team, right? Is the people that you adopt into your life and really align with you artistically and want you to find that. Because the people that really are empathetic, like Terry was to me, and wanted me to find that, has given me the ability to find my process. And when you find that, then, it's like Sir Anthony Hopkins says, you just say the words. Well, when he says that quote, a lot of actors know what he means because he's done so much of the work, whatever that is, within his own process, that when it comes down to being on set, when it comes down to being on stage, the only thing left to do is to say the words because the behavior is already going to be there. You know how you feel about that person within that scene. And then something I will speak to in film that is difficult because film is very technical. It's a team-driven sport, is what I always say, is that you're shooting out of order a lot of times. So this work can really give you the foundation of where am I at tempo-wise within the story as my character. And I will say, and I was told this, it was a really wonderful compliment by John Shimke, who's the editor of Somewhere in Montana, is that I have the biggest arc of all the characters, and that is just because I am an outsider coming to John's world. And my tempo has to change a little bit to let him in. And so I think a lot of the work that I did was to be ready to quickly understand what part of the story I was telling, where my tempo was within that, because sometimes I was completely out of order. But, one thing that I've always done, I mean, this is just kind of a little thing that, I do to pay honor to all the work that I've done, is the night before, I usually just spend a couple hours with the scene for the last time, because I will say this, David, and it might sound silly to some, but it really is. It's the last time that you get to do that scene before you give it away, is what I say. And some of these scenes are very hard to give away. I mean, you get emotionally, like there's almost a feeling of loss because you really put so much work into these scenes, but a lot of times you fall in love with these scenes too. And you fall in love with what they can do, right? Because again, a lot of storytelling is about the ability to make people feel, to make people be introspective, to hopefully make a difference, right? That's what a lot of artists get into it for, is that love of storytelling. And that love of storytelling comes a lot of times with what we can give an audience to make them really feel and be introspective. So that's my process, is really just that last night going through the scene. And sometimes, it allows some really cool things. I'll speak to one that I actually haven't spoken on in a podcast, but you're an artist, you'll enjoy this. Michael Monks is a fellow New Yorker. And again, being on set with him was a masterclass. What a kind human being. The last time I went through the scene with him, because he plays Frank, who is the investor. And he is, essentially in the place where, because of where we're at in the film at that point, in Somewhere in Montana, is that the money might not be there anymore. And for Fabian, that feels like he's losing his dream, because again, this is a legacy project for him. So it's incredibly important. That night before, I wrote a monologue because we're both New Yorkers, kind of almost connecting Michael and I, and but also connecting the backstory that I have with Fabian and Frank. Because Fabian and Frank, a lot of times, like with the investor-director relationship, you work with the same people over and over again, and they align with you. They align with you because, again, they're willing to sacrifice for you. They're willing to go out on a limb and give you a big chunk of change to essentially fund your project, but it's something because they also believe in you at the same time. So that's an extraordinary relationship that a lot of people don't really give credit to a lot of times, is that EP, that executive producer, and that director, because there's an alignment there of like, I see you, I see your vision, I love your vision, I love how you tell stories, I think they're impactful, and yes, I'll front the bill because I want what you want. And so that's a point in the film where we are basically at a rock and a hard place, where the film is on the brink of annihilation. And because of the conversations that Michael and I had, we just drew on this really cool thing. And I actually wrote a little monologue that I actually filmed in the scene, which Michael was just so grateful. I mean, you talk about these pros, and I think the biggest compliment I can tell a pro actor is somebody that is an unknown up and coming, but wanting to learn and be around people like Michael is the space that they give you. And he gave me the space to do that. And he's also an acting teacher. So he was on board, and we'd have this great conversation, and we then would go off and like take the time to digest it. And when we were on set, we actually filmed this monologue that I wrote, just to kind of be a lead-in. And while it didn't make the film, and this is what Brandon said sometimes, is that you have to do those types of things even if they don't make the film, because they actually inform the scene that does make the film. Mm-hmm. And so I think you can see in these little moments, like, because of that monologue that really came flushing out of me the night before I gave away the scene for the last time. It was my last ditch effort, because I my monologue to him was, a lot of it was our backstory. Like we've been through this together. Like, me, like and so when you see the actual scene, you can almost think of like that backstory that I created and that monologue that I created leading right into the conversation. And you can see that just dynamic of like, we're both in pain because we both want the same thing, but we know that it might be impossible. And so I really do. You're speaking to me as an artist, so that's a really cool one to open up as, because it really is. It's a lot of the work that you do off screen. It's so much of the relationships that you develop off screen. And then when you're around pros that give you that space, it gives artists and actors like me just the opportunity to thrive when it's go time.
What do you admire about your character, Fabian? What do you admire about this person?
I think this is something that I say all the time, but don't sleep on dreamers. Dreamers are fighters, and I mean that. Dreamers are fighters. I live in Los Angeles. I live in a city that is full of dreamers, and LA gets a bad rep sometimes, right? But a lot of the people that come out to LA, they're dreamers, and the thing about dreamers is they will fight tooth and nail to get their dreams realized. And I'll say that about a lot of other people. And again, this film goes into legacy. Fabian is building his legacy. He's trying to leave a couple good stories that are impactful behind. And I think a lot of that is to do with just that dreamer mentality. So when I think of Fabian, I think about how much I love him. It's because there's a lot of me in him. And that's what I was able to find through this process. And I did. I told Brandon this the night that we actually screened it in Montana, is that, Fabian will live on in me forever. And I really took a lot of this as just a gift. I gave him a really cool gift at the premiere, which was made out of barnwood. It was a sign with somewhere in Montana and all the different, shooting locations, and John and I right in the middle. And what he gave to me was so special, and I wrote it on the back, was, thank you for the role of a lifetime, Matt Drago, Fabian Verdugo, because it really is that for me. Because regardless of, how people see the film, and obviously I hope it does well. I think it's a very important story of the times, but I feel like I've already won because of what it's given me and how it's ignited my craft and how it's given me confidence and, most importantly, the relationships that I've built within the film.
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing this, Matt. I have a question for you then. If you had the opportunity to sit down with Fabian, he walks in, sits down at the table at the breakfast place that you're going to meet Graham at later that morning, and he comes in and sits down at the table next to you, and you're like, oh my gosh, it's him. It's actually him. Is there anything that you don't know about this character that you'd like to ask him a question about, or maybe you need deeper knowledge about him that you just never really investigated? What kind of question would you ask him about him?
That's really good. I feel like I have actually asked him all the questions that I've needed to fully embody him. I think when you really get to the point as an actor, as an artist, doing what I love to do in really fully embodying characters, when you allow yourself to fully give yourself over to a character, Matt and Fabian are interchangeable, and I mean that. It's one of the things that my acting teacher told me even when we shot the scene. That was my audition scene that I sent off. I did the scene once. And again, we're in the times where you can shoot a scene 20, 40 times if you want to and pick, the 13th take or whatever and edit it a certain way. And David, for this one, I only shot it once. I only shot the scene once, and my acting teacher literally looked at me and he went like this. And I was like, what does that mean? And he was like, I wouldn't ask you to change a thing because you have a very clear take on what you want to do with this character. And it was at that point where I started understanding like how much I could bring myself to this character and how much of us were in alignment. And I think sometimes, and I'll say this to a lot of younger actors out there, or people that are struggling, I think the roles that are meant for you will find you. And it's not until sometimes you end up even booking the role that you even know why. And sometimes it's even later than that, David. I mean, honestly, it wasn't until I started to be on set and I started to understand like just how much of his heart beat in mine already and how much of Fabian was in alignment with me. So the questions are questions that I've have had and answered, but I think when I fully aligned with him, and my acting teacher even said it once, he said, you need to start forgetting, the name Fabian Verdugo. Just be Matt. Because I was so in it at that point that I felt like the two had merged. And I felt like I honestly would have never needed to be at the, coffee shop with him across the table because I felt like we were on the same side of the table. Like we had really become, a part of each other. And that really does come from the work. It comes from the love of the game. And I do say this to young actors all the time, enjoy the process. Like really, and I know that sounds trivial, but really enjoy putting yourself on tape. You can do uniquely with a role what you can only do. And sometimes it's just the curiosity. I feel like so much of this role for me was just being curious about this big story. And I remember the callback, the producer session with Brandon and Eden, the producer. And we were on a Zoom call like we are right now for probably about 45 minutes or an hour. I think we ran the scene once. And it was because I was just so curious about the project. I had read the script 3 times before I even put myself on tape for it. But it's because I was in love with it already. It was one of those stories that I had always wanted to tell because, again, I want to tell stories that I feel like resonate with people and really can make a difference. I think that's what true art does. And so when I fell, head over heels for this character, that alignment just naturally happened. And again, I just felt like sitting down at the coffee shop, like I and Fabian were one, and we were proud to tell this story together.
Okay, so take us into the theater or onto our couch before we press play on the movie. And we got this insane size package of popcorn in our lap, and it's all over the place. But we're ready to hit the play and to catch this for the first time to see somewhere in Montana. You're in the row behind us. And you know what's coming, but we don't know. This is we're excited, but we don't know what's going to happen. Tap us on the shoulder and give us a little love letter about what we're going to see on the screen in this movie. Kind of give us that little tap, because I just love to know that you're sitting behind me while I'm watching this. What do you want us to know before we see this for the first time?
Yeah. Jokingly, I'd say put your phone down for an hour and 45 minutes. We all need to do that every once in a while. This is a film from start to finish that is about finding a path forward. It's about finding a path forward and understanding that you don't have to agree on everything. These are 2 uniquely different people with 2 uniquely different energies. And part of the work that Graham and I did off screen was to pay honor to that, to understand that we didn't have to agree on everything to see each other and to find mutual respect. And I think mutual respect, honestly, is one of the highest forms of love that you can give another person. And so I think that we need films like this because, again, I would tap you on the shoulder and just say, let yourself be available to this message is what I would say, because I think it's a big message. And I think it's a message of 2 people that wouldn't find themselves in the same room in any situation, but that's what Brandon wrote so eloquently, is that they're forced into a situation where they have to work through it. And I think that that is something that is just extraordinary. And so much of this is built into the tapestry of being in Montana, shooting this film. And for me, being, someone that was born in rural Virginia, but then has lived my adult life in New York City and LA in sophistication. I mean, David, I can't remember the last time that I have stared at a lake for, an hour or looked at a waterfall for an hour and just reflected. And sometimes we need that. And sometimes we need that to be able to tell a good story as an artist. And we were just given this incredible ecosystem by Brandon to really thrive. And I mean, there are just so many things that we did together off screen that interpret what you see on screen. The power of this story is, frankly, the American dream, is honoring each other's legacy, whether you're a filmmaker, whether you're a rancher with a multi-generational ranch, whether you want to be a mom or a dad and you want to own a home, right? Legacy is it's so important to respect each other's legacy. And I always say this, if you can let another person in, you realize that there's more that connects us than could ever divide us, but you have to let the other person in. So I say that about this film too. Let this film in, let it speak to you, because it really is a powerful message and one that we all really need right now.
And that's why I'm glad you're here, Matt. That was really good. Now I'm going to eat my popcorn and enjoy this movie. On top of this, you get to work not only on screen, but you get to work with your amazing wife and partner. Can you talk a little bit about what you do together, the two of you, as well?
Yeah, this is something that I told Brandon and Eden and Joe, our producers and our director too, is that I do feel like Fabian lives on through me. One of the things that really resonated with me the first time that we screened the film, which tidbit of behind the scenes, is the last time I was on set, my last shot was walking out of the theater. That is the last thing that I filmed on set. The next time I walked into that theater was to screen that film, that very same film. So a very, really cool experience there. Fabian, and this is what I told Brandon, he lives on through me in the way that I feel like collaboratively, this is what I've always wanted to do and what I've wanted to be, but it felt like I needed this role to almost unlock that. One thing that I got told when I walked out of that theater and we had screened the movie from a lot of the locals in Paulson, Montana, a lot of the same things were said to me, was that it was really important for them to have their little corner of the world showcased, to tell their story. And I feel like sometimes we need that, right? We get a lot of stories with the big cities, New York and LA, but sometimes we need those little pockets of the country to get their voices out there, to get their story heard, right? And that's what resonated with me. After I had given away the character of Fabian to this film, is how can I adopt all of the things that I learned from Fabian and bring them into my life? And then, obviously, my wife, we've had, so many ups and downs together in our career, but we realized that the best thing that we could do is to be collaborators. And there's nothing like collaborating, David, with someone that you love. Mm-hmm. I mean, honestly, you fight for it together. You want the same things together. Even if you have positive dissonance, it is positive dissonance because you want the same thing. Well, she's an incredible writer. She's been writing up a storm since 2020, which forced a lot of artists to go inward. She realized that acting really wasn't what she wanted, and she really wanted more creative control to be able to come upstairs and flesh out a script or write a log line or write character arcs. And it's really kind of informed our dynamic as a married couple, because I look at the scripts and the characters really from the actor's point of view, and she looks at them more from the writer's point of view, and it's like a happy marriage there too. So our next chapter with Dragon Hunter Productions is to bring a story back to our hometown in Front Royal, Virginia. And it's this beautiful Christmas story that Laura wrote. And it really does speak to just the things that sometimes we battled with growing up in a small Virginia town. But how nostalgic we are, because at a certain point in your life, nostalgia hits deep, and we're there right now. And so we really want to, again, bring back a film to this little corner of our town that has influenced us so much. She's already won a couple awards for this script in Northern Virginia, and it's just it feels like the natural progression for me, not only as an actor, but as an artist and a collaborator. And I think I learned through Somewhere in Montana just the joy that comes out of collaboration. Because again, film is a team sport. And so, one of the joys that I'm having with it right now, staying in my lane more as a producer, actor, her more as a writer, and I also kind of want her to direct, because I love that marriage of directing and writing, because you really see what you want and you can articulate that clearly to your cinematographer, your lighting department, your sound department. Is meeting those two worlds and understanding that we can actually start to do very much what is in the vein of what Fabian Verdugo did. And so that is just really a kismet that this role found me in my life when I needed it most. And it's just given me this incredible gift to move forward in my future as a creative in this life.
I love when life imitates art. That's great. I love that you were able to tie that all together, get that inspiration, carry it forward, and have this character live on off the screen as well. It's amazing. I love that. So, okay, as we wrap up, Matt, you've been so kind with your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
As we wrap up, where do you want to send people where they can find out where they can see Somewhere in Montana? We want to make sure I'll have all the links in the show notes for your website, with your amazing wife as well. But where would you like to send people so that we can actually see this? Can you give us an update on that as well?
Absolutely. I share all my updates on my Instagram. I try to make it really easy because I can only do so many social media platforms. So I'm active on Instagram. You can find me there at Matt Drago, MattDrago. From there, I've got my link tree up. It's got my websites, mattdrago.com, my actor website, and dragonhunterproductions.com. It's also got my IMDb if you want to look at my past and future projects. And I also share things from my life there, acting is life, right? And so I like to keep the same, the both together, right? Whether it's an anniversary dinner or something with my dog or, my football team or whatever it is, like I like to share myself, right? I think that's a big part of the journey, is understanding that, you embrace yourself fully as an artist, but you also have to enjoy your life as well. And so that's the best way to find me. And then I will be posting all the updates to your question on where it's screening. Right now, it's a limited release around the country. We're hoping to get it in more theaters. We're actually going to Palm Springs in a few days to do a screening there. So it will hopefully come to more theaters in the country. And then eventually I will be sharing updates when it comes to VOD and streaming as well, just in case there's not a theater close by for you.
Okay, one last question as you go. I know you're going to head out the door in a second.
No, take your time.
The name of the podcast is Living the Next Chapter, and you said next chapter several times, which makes me giddy because it's kind of the name of the show. Yeah. So I need to know from you how Matt Drago is living the next chapter. What's coming? I know we want to celebrate the movie, we want to live in the moment, but there's this question about what's next for you. Any kind of insights of what we can anticipate for you down the road as you live your next chapter?
Absolutely. I mean, I know that I can't rub the crystal ball. I've been through the ups and downs of my career at this point, and I have been a dreamer, which means that I have been a fighter to keep those dreams alive. And a lot of times that takes the odds and ends jobs to keep the creative passion flowing. But I think that my next chapter is, and I say this right now to you, David, is that I really feel like I'm in the sweet spot of my career. Because I really am just enjoying it. I'm enjoying where I am, and I'm not looking too much in the future, but I spoke to it. It's a team sport, and building your team is imperative, and building it in the ways that you need to stay in your lane as an artist and really let that be the thing that you focus on. So, I just signed on with a great manager, Richard John Martin at Ignite Talent Management. I signed on with a great agent, HRI Talent with Tanya Kleckner. I've got an extraordinary PR rep, which is, somebody that's kind of taught me even how to do interviews like I'm doing with you today in portrait PR with Mia Hansen, who's given me so much of her time. And why I shout out to those people is those are my team. Those are the people that allow me to focus on what I need to focus on. Because when you get an audition as a creative, you should be joyous. You should be giddy because it's your opportunity to put yourself on tape, to put yourself out there. And then the hardest part as an actor comes, you have to let it go. And so I really feel like I'm in the sweet spot where when I get an audition right now, I get excited and I really dive deep into it and I see what I can do with it. And then the chips fall as they may, right? But I think past just the auditions that my team is getting me and the opportunities to meet casting directors and producers is also this just love of being a collaborator. I think there's nothing greater in the world than to collaborate, especially with people that you love, and building that team of people that you love, that cinematographer, that editor. I mean, we see it all the time in film. It's the same people working hand in hand. It's because their visions align with each other. So I feel like my next chapter is just being open to it and letting the chips fall as they may.
Excellent. I love it, Matt. Again, thank you so much for taking time for this. I really appreciate it. We'll have links to everything that Matt's mentioned in the show notes for everyone. Go out, make sure you buy tickets, be there, support in your local theaters, wherever you can see the movie, and follow Matt on his website. You'll have all the information. Go follow him on Instagram as well. I'm sure he'd love to hear from you. Matt, thank you again for so much for doing this. I really appreciate you being here. And like you say, it takes a village. So thank you for allowing us to be members of your village by having this conversation. Really appreciate you. Thanks for being here, Matt.
David, it's been an honor and a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on today.
Hey, thanks for being here for the Living the Next Chapter podcast. So glad to have you as part of our family of listeners. There's a seat for you just here on Living the Next Chapter, and I'm so happy that you have listened to all the way to the end. Wow, you are now my new bestie. I want to let you know that I host 7 other podcasts on top of Living the Next Chapter. Yep, 8 total. One of them is called the How To Podcast series. If you are thinking, you know what, Dave, this podcast thing seems like a lot of fun. Well, I'll give you a secret. It is. It's a great, amazing, fun time where you can get to meet great people, get your word out there, promote your book, promote what your coaching program, whatever you're doing. Podcasting is great. And if you want to learn how to do this, what you're hearing right now, head over to howtopodcast.ca and look up the How to Podcast series on YouTube, whatever app you're listening on. You'll find me there. And I'd love for you to come listen to how to do this. And if you're interested and have questions on how to podcast, reach out to me at howtopodcast.ca. Thank you for listening. Talk soon.